Alright, item 4. Electric current and its origin and use. Just as the steam is an invisible agent with which the pressure is applied in order to drive the steam locomotive, is current invisible agent with the pressure applied in order to drive the electrical and diesel electrical locomotives. Electric current is measured in amperes and gauged in termed amber is employed with electrical circuits to show the volume of the current that is being fed to the circuit. Before the current may be followed with the current circuit, the two conditions must also be provided that they are. A complete circuit or path must be provided from the source of supply, therefore the resistance back to the source of supply. The source of the supply takes the form of the generator and storage battery pressure, which is usually called the voltage or electrical motive force, must be made and available to push the current through the circuit. The voltmeter is gauged in which measures the voltage pressure and available for the push current through the circuit. Therefore, on any higher voltage available to the generator is the amount of the current which must be pushed through the circuit. On a diesel electric locomotive, the diesel engine is used to drive the generator suitable size, thus provided with the voltage pressure necessary to push the current via cables contracted to the traction motor. On electric locomotives, voltage and pressure is obtained by the overhead riding the push current via cables contracted to the traction motors associated with the powerhouse diesel engine. Coal-fired boilers sometimes force of the failing water used to drive the generators is suitable to the capacity those primary movers feed, maintain the voltage pressure and overhead wiring. Alright, this shows the main tension, auxiliary high tension wire, pantographic pivot cars, pantographic isolation switch, voltmeter number 1 end, 160 amperes, 18 amperes, 10 amperes, 9 amperes AM, switches, resistant, reverser, supply main generator, computer, 45-inch diameter wheels, pivot cars, total number, wheel box, traction motor, armatures, over buffers, traction motors, switches, exciter, main generators, resistance, reversers number 2, and cab. Driver's control panel. This is the driver's control panel. Voltage and pressure, which is maintained overhead riding the use of the electrical locomotive electric train, is maintained at about 150 volts. 1500 volts. The under certain circumstances, the line voltage won't vary up and down with 200 or 300 volts, but at all times regarding with a high voltage, high tension current, great care is necessary to avoid the risk of the human contact with which the location of any connections is within about the locomotive. Remember, well is also the most metals unbroken with jet water, but will also conduct also act as conductor for the current. The following items considered high tension equipment: the pantograph, the connections to all roof rigging, all equipment housed in both number 1 and number 2 high tension compartments, a voltmeter in each of the cab, the motors, drive, and 4 auxiliary machines associated with the cable connections, 6 traction motors, cable connections. Also, this equipment is reasonably well secured against human contact. To indicate the high tension current from any of the locomotive, lower the pantographs, isolate them from closing the respective isolation cocks. If the pantograph can be lowered, use the hook stick to open the pantographic switch. If it must never be assumed that any of the pantographics have either moved in either direction with a visual inspection. Item 5. Circuit breakers and switches and fuses. Electrical circuit may be described as a path of which current is caused to flow together with the source of supply of the current flow, usually a generator, storage battery. The equipment being operated, fuses protect the circuit and the switches, circuit breakers with control the current flow. A closed circuit is complete with the circuit breaker where the current would flow through. The items described above, the open circuit breaker, potential circuit breaker, describing where to do some of the breaks for the total path the current cannot flow. Since one of the essentials of the current flow is complete circuit with the opening of the switch and the circuit breaker, and when the burning out of the fuse will cause an open circuit. A switch and circuit breaker may therefore describe an item to provide with the control of the current flow. A fuse is a safety device placed in the circuit to protect the circuit from a harmful surge of current. The action of the fuse therefore is automatically open the circuit to prevent the further current flow where the harmful high current surge is present. With the cartridge type of the fuse, the test strip of the conduction will iron that some predetermined fuse valve with its value is used. Thus, the current surge appear with the fuse wire fuse with the burns and become broken and disconnecting the circuit. On a Class 46 class locomotive, there are 9 cartridges. The fuses are employed in the various circuits. In the auxiliary high tension circuit, there are 1 to 160 ampere fuse that protects the auxiliary circuit, 150 ampere with fuse that protects the supply generator motor, 2 18 ampere fuse that respectively protect the 2 compressor motors, 2 9.5 ampere fuses that protect the 4 voltmeters. This picture of the low tension panel number 2 end. Alright, this circuit shows the battery with an opening on the switch, with an open switch, open motor to the conductor, and simple electrical circuit. Um, this shows the battery switch closed. Also, motor open circuit broken at the X and Y end. This shows the short circuit conductor touching the X and Y with the battery to go into the motor and through the fuses. The generator going through different parallel circuit lamps. A generator going through a series of circuits of motors or lamps. I guess yes, a series of generators circulating the lamps. The fuse test panel, spare fuses, motor cutout circuit breakers. These are your fuses. This shows your fan motor miniature circuit breaker, fan type delay reserve, fan type circuit breaker. In low tension circuit, there are three fuses the 100 ampere supply generator fuse with protect the control circuit, the 100 ampere battery fuse, battery positive fuses, and the 100 amp battery and negative fuses to protect the battery for the batteries. Before any of the fuse circuits is handled for any reason, including the renewal of the corresponding circuit, must be isolated, opening control circuit breaker. There's a very good reason for the precaution is that while burnt out of the fuse, they automatically disconnect the original circuit, contact the hand made by providing the new new and short path of the circuit that the human body. There's another protective device employed with low resistance circuit termed thermal circuit breaker. This is an item of the circuit breaker which is inbuilt with a thermal strip which reacts to the like of the fuse insofar that there is a harmful current surge appears with the thermal strip. It relaxes, strips the circuit breaker open, thus opening the circuit. Unlike the cartridge type fuse, renewal is not necessary, although allow the thermal strip at a short time to cool off. This resets the switch. Never hold the thermal circuit breaker on position. This will defeat its purpose. Alright, item 5. Magnetic type switches, electromagnetic type contactors. These two devices sense the basically switch was employed with the 46 glass locomotive to connect and disconnect vary the route of the current flow. As these are employed with the high tension circuit, it is necessary that they be remotely controlled with the opening and closing action. Example, the magnetic tips of the switch and the two contactors which apply to disconnect the high tension current feed to the two air compressor motors. Example, the electro-pneumatic type, the contactors are 6-line switches that starting the resistant contactors. All of these necessary housed in the high tension compartment of the locomotive. Each of these types really relies on the principal temporary magnetic to close them to hold them and close the spring with which opens them temporarily. Magnetism is destroyed. The closing of the contractor phase for the contacts of the high tension current with the opening of the phase and disconnects the high tension current with which the magnetic type switches. The solenoid is fixed in one arm of the contractor control circuit with a supply motor, generator, storage batteries, sheave the engine drive, the coil, which never becomes magnetized, thus attractive, holds the second arm of the contractors. Well, the electromagnetic type contractor solenoid is used with a temporary magnet to control the passage compressed air. The pantographic control of reserve air is 2 small air cylinders. For your basic electro-pneumatic contactors interlocks, we can start with the control air reserve at 80 pounds going through the exhaust, which runs through the electro-pneumatic pole plate with a push-button switch on your positive and negative. Also, from the control air reserve through the exhaust of the electro-pneumatic valve goes to the moisture drain to another valve, which can, when the contactor interlocker opens on a positive, the negative switch gate. Then it goes to the current goes to another contractor opening interlocking switch. Alright, the piston and the cylinder is linked with the moving the control arm. The thrust of the air piston forces together the whole of the contractor phase for permitting the current flow. When the control current with the switch off of the solenoid, magnesium disappears. Spring reverse for the control air valve, which cuts off the current control air of the piston. Air piston exhausts the air of the air piston. The spring new force of the air piston back and the control force of the air part, thus cutting off and flowing the high tension current. In summary, therefore, the operating either of the magnetic valve type switch with electro-pneumatic control contact to control the flow of the high tension current with low tension control circuit is necessary to operate the solenoid the control current is 120 volts supplied with the supply motor generator and the next of the storage batteries. To operate with the electro-pneumatic contactor, in addition to the control current to operate the solenoid, control air pressure is required to operate the contactor air piston. The electro-pneumatic arrangement is often referred to as the magnetic valve. When the magnetic valve is attached directly to the high tension contactor, the term is a unit switch. Since the unit switches are housed together in the high tension compartments of the locomotive, they are referred to as switch groups. They are air cock terms. The switch group isolating the cock is located in the supply pipe when the pantographic control reservoirs and switch groups in the machinery compartment. Item 6. Employment of high-tension 1500 volt current 46 class locomotives. When the 1500 volt current is available to read with the pantograph with which electrical locomotives 10 higher tension machines are required to be driven with such an order of locomotive that may function with trailing haulage. 6 of the machines are called with the traction motor. 4 of the machines are called auxiliary machines and named as follows. The supply motor generator, the exciter motor generator, the number 1 air compressor motor, the number 2 air compressor motor. 6 traction motors, when driven with a high tension current, will each derive the locomotive axles to which connected with us contributed with the attractive effort of the locomotive. Traction motors are identified being the number running from number 1 end of the locomotive traction, number 1 end of the motors, number 2, 3, and following the number 1 bogie truck, number 4, 5, and 6 motors following then that order, number 2 in the bogie truck. The current being fed with the number 1, 2, and 3 motors is read on the ammeter, second on the right on the driver's station. The ammeter nearest the fireman observer station reads the current being fed the motors 4, 5, and 6. In the trailing haulage, the current reading on the both of the ammeter should agree, except where the one bank of the motors has been isolated in disagreement, meaning that the armatures, certain motors are rotating faster than others, therefore the wheel slipping is occurring. Our traction motor high tension blower arrangement. You have your high compartment tension supply main generator, exciter main generator, traction motors, high tension compartments. To ventilate and prevent the intrusion of the foreign emitter of the traction motor, the high tension compartments are forced to draw a supply. Attached supply motor generator and auxiliary motor generator is the large potential figure type fan blower. When these machines are largely volume air pressure fed to the longitudinal duct proportional with the air fed with each of the high tension compartment of each of the 6 traction motors. Alright, this shows 150 volts going through a series of groupings of lamps with 250 volts, 150 volt series, parallel grouping, 500 volts, traction motor combinations. These are motors, and it doesn't say lamps, so you have a series of grouping of 6 and 150 volts, series parallel grouping of 150 volts with a ground, and parallel grouping of 150 volt, 1500 volts to 750 volts traction motor combinations. Alright, these use the regenerative braking of the 46 class employed with the 6 traction motor retarded with the locomotive. Therefore, the train during the process, however, the traction motors are acting on 6 generators. The conversion of electric motor into the generator, simple matter of requiring the alteration of the component parts, but merely some of the alteration to the current path. The circuits during the employment of the motor, the ammeter with the meter with extremely high at the driver's station reads the amount of the current now being regenerated by all 6 motors in the series combination being used. If the series parallel combination is being used, then the 2 banks of the motor are regenerating. The armature ammeter current should be multiplied by 2. Current showing in the field ammeter of the meter second from the right reads the strength of the excitation motor of the motor field supply motor generated when driven with a high tension current with 11500 volts produce a low tension current with 120 volts, the purpose of which will be described under the instruction dealing with the control circuit. The exciter motor generator, when driving a high tension of 1500 volt, also produced a low tension current separated from the former machine output. Alright, I believe we're on the current supply motor generated when driving the high tension current of 1500 volts produce low tension current at 120 volts. Purpose will be described under the instruction dealing with the control circuit. The exciter motor generator while driving the high tension current 1500 volts also produce low tension current separated with the former machine output. The current is used to drive the motors of the 8 resistant fans, also make it possible to convert the 6 traction motor into the generators. These 2 above mentioned machines also have been attached to the armature spindle with a large blower fan to the machines run the blue blower runs. These blowers, called traction motor blowers, are provided with large volume of air through the routed traction motor existing, the cooling them, and also preventing induction of metal filings in the brake shoe dust, etc. Alright, this is a little bit more complicated. 1500 volts, pantographic isolation switch. Alright, this should be the cab 1, differential overload relay, mainly isolation switch auxiliaries. Relays, voltmeters, different voltmeters, your current, also through the rheostat line switches, traction motor armatures 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, armature ammeter, overload relay, current, the isolation high tension circuit breaker series of combination traction motors, traction field armature, traction motor fields, motor E generator, differential relay, and C relay former auxiliaries. When the motors of both number 1 and 2 air compressors driven with a high tension extension of 1500 volts are induced, the compressed and cool absorb the action of respective compound compressor being so driven. In the sum of the high tension circuit breaker forks two different paths. The first main high tension from the high tension circuit, which is directed through the traction motor. The secondly auxiliary high tension circuit, which junctions branches away inside the locomotive. The driving four auxiliary high tension machines is quite impracticable to drive the four auxiliary machines while not using the other fork of the high tension current to the traction motor. The conditions necessary to take care of the circumstances where the locomotive is standing or coasting. However, the main high tension circuit circuit cannot be used to drive six traction motors unless auxiliary high tension current is functioning. Because of the latter circuit, it provides the control system of the control link for the former. Alright, item 7, the control circuit. The control circuit, low tension circuit breaker with the 4056 class of the locomotive 120 volts supplied, maintained supply motor generating S storage batteries to receive the charging supply motor generating very limited period of the charge held in the storage batteries a little supply with the control circuit. Only with the correct use of the control circuit from this source of supply is in the initial stage of the engine's preparation and emergency of the main line called for the failure to supply motor generator, which cannot be corrected. Current from the above-mentioned sources used the driver to operate with the pantographs. Also, a large group of the contractors will operate with either the contact disconnect high-tension current with the 10 high-tension machines of the locomotive and very path of such. Storage batteries of 46 class locomotive that have only limited storage capacity. Therefore, it's important to get the supply motor generator running early in the preparation routine to keep them running during the traffic surfaces. When the supplier motor generator is running, it is producing low tension current, but there is no demand on the storage battery current, and the battery charging is taking place. A continuous yellow lamp with cab warning with the supply motor generator is not running. If the supply motor generator is 100 amp, the fuse fails and no output of the machine, even though it is running, and the battery current automatically takes over the supply of the control circuit. This condition is indicated by the discharge indication of the ammeter. The battery control will open. Also, the exciter motor generator will stall. It's just a low tension panel number 2 end. Are additional to the cab heaters and the food heaters will fail. They include with the simplified control schematic diagram should be studied with the preferred as required. Explain two source supply with the control circuit reaction to either source of failing the battery contact or connecting the dividing point of the source of supply. The contractor is closing automatically if the supply generator is producing control current, where it opens automatically and the current being supplied with the supply generator. The device located in low tension cabinet control of the battery contactor. The device is not shown as called with the reverse current relay, the generator automatic switch, or the battery relay. If the device fails to open with the battery contactor with no current will be produced, the supply generator with the battery current will be flowed through the back of the battery contactor. Drive the generator motor discharge of the batteries in this process. Item 7, the control circuit explanatory notes on schematics.